The match was about to end. You could feel it in the air, that specific hum from the crowd, the one that signals the inevitable conclusion. The champion, the prodigy, had her opponent locked in her signature submission. She had been dominant for 400 days. This was just another defense, another name on her list. The referee's hand was raised, ready to call for the bell. The camera zoomed in on the prodigy's face, glistening with sweat, a picture of absolute control. This was her arena, her era, her world, and we were all just living in it. Until the lights turned gold. It wasn't a glitch. It was a deliberate soaking royal gold that flooded the arena, silencing 20,000 people in an instant. Smoke, thick and white, billowed from the entrance ramp, obscuring the stage. Everyone froze. The referee stopped his count. The prodigy, confused and angry, released her hold. The commentators, usually so eloquent, were suddenly silent, their microphones capturing only the collective gasp of the crowd. That's when her entrance theme hit. The first chord, the one note that an entire generation of fans associated with her. The sound wasn't just a cheer, it was an explosion, a physical, emotional release from years of waiting. We see a close-up of a fan, tears streaming down his face, hugging a complete stranger. Another shot, a father pointing to the ramp, telling his young daughter, "That's her. That's the one I told you about." She didn't just return, she took over. She reset the entire game. The air changed. The hierarchy evaporated. The script everyone had been reading for the past year was lit on fire, and from the ashes, a single shadow emerged, walking slowly, deliberately, towards the light. The golden light. The walk to the ring felt like it took an hour. Every step was a story. The camera didn't cut away. It just stayed on her, this ghost made of flesh, as the silhouette slowly resolved into the person everyone thought was gone forever. Let's call her the matriarch. She wasn't looking left or right. She wasn't high-fiving the fans, though their hands were stretched out, desperate for a simple touch. Her gaze was locked on one single point in the universe, the center of the ring. And in that center stood the prodigy, the one who was anointed as the next her. The prodigy's face was a masterpiece of conflicting emotions. First, the shock, the denial. Then you saw it replaced by something cold, something bitter, rage. This was her night, her moment. This wasn't a celebration, it was an invasion. The matriarch slid under the bottom rope. No pyro, no fanfare. She just appeared. She stood up, and the two were inches apart. The roar of the crowd died down, replaced by a sizzling hum of anticipation. The matriarch didn't say a word. She didn't have to. She just looked at the championship belt resting on the prodigy's shoulder. Then she slowly, almost sadly, looked back into her eyes. The message was clear. That's pretty, but it belongs to me. The prodigy was trembling, her entire body rigid. She had spent years climbing this mountain, only to find the person who built the mountain was waiting for her at the top. The show cut to black on that single image. Two eras colliding. And the world was left to wonder what happens when an unstoppable force meets the immovable object that built the very ground they stand on. The moment the feed cut to black, the silence backstage was deafening. Usually, after a show goes off the air, it's a controlled chaos. Technicians are yelling, producers are giving notes, wrestlers are congratulating each other. Tonight, there was nothing. Just the sound of boots on concrete, walking back from the gorilla position, the area right behind the curtain. When she walked through, the entire roster was there, lined up against the walls, as if by instinct. No one spoke, no one clapped. Some of the younger talent, the ones who had only heard stories, looked like they had seen an apparition. A few veterans, her old contemporaries, just nodded, a simple silent sign of respect, or perhaps a warning. The man in charge, the promoter, was standing there with his headset still on, his mouth slightly open. He had known, of course. He had signed the check, but seeing it, feeling that reaction, that was something else entirely. She walked past him, past her peers, past the legends, and didn't stop until she reached her old locker room, the one they had kept empty, almost like a shrine, for all these years. The nameplate was still there, tarnished but legible. She traced her finger over the letters, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open. The sound of the latch clicking shut echoed down the empty hallway. It was a definitive, terrifying period on a sentence everyone thought was finished. The ghost was no longer just a memory. It was back in the building. And it had just claimed its old room. Meanwhile, chaos erupted in the champion's locker room. The prodigy tore through the door, the championship belt clutched in her hand. She wasn't holding it like a prize. She was holding it like a weapon. She hurled it against the steel lockers, the crash echoing the one that had just happened to her career. "Did you see them?" she screamed. Not at anyone in particular, but at the world. "They forgot. In 2 seconds, they forgot everything I built." She had clawed her way to this spot. She had beaten everyone. She had carried the company through its darkest times. This was supposed to be her night, her legacy cemented, and in one flash of golden light, she was reduced to a supporting character in someone else's story. Her best friend, another wrestler, tried to calm her down. "It's just buzz," she said. "It'll die down. You're still the champ." The prodigy just looked at her, her eyes burning with a chilling clarity. "You don't get it," she whispered, the anger replaced by a sudden cold fear. "She didn't come back for the buzz. She came back for this." She pointed at the dented title on the floor. "She thinks I'm just keeping it warm for her." The prodigy picked up the belt, her knuckles white. The doubt was there, a poison in the well. Was she good enough? Was she ever good enough? Or was she just the best of who was left? The matriarch hadn't even touched her, and she was already bleeding. The next 12 hours were not a news cycle. They were a digital tidal wave. The return didn't just trend, it broke the platform's metrics. Every sports show, every morning talk show, every entertainment blog led with the same clip. The gold light, the music, the roar. But it was the fan reactions that told the real story. Thousands of videos flooded the web. People in the arena, capturing their own faces, tears streaming, mouths wide open in disbelief. People in bars, dropping their drinks, screaming and climbing on tables. People at home, jumping off their couches, their living rooms illuminated by that same golden glow from the TV. The algorithm began pulling up compare and contrast videos. Her, from 10 years ago, juxtaposed with her last night. The media narrative was forming, fast and irreversible. She was the returning queen, the savior, the one true icon. And in this story, the current champion, the prodigy, was cast in an unflattering role. The placeholder, the usurper, the interim champion. No one mentioned the prodigy's dominant 400-day reign. No one mentioned her 5-star matches. All that mattered, the only thing that mattered, was that she was back. The prodigy watched it all from her phone, the endless scroll of praise for her new rival becoming a digital prison. The world had spoken, and in their story, she was no longer the hero. Far away from the noise, in a sterile, silent hotel room, the matriarch sat on the edge of the bed. The TV was off. Her phone was on silent, buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. She hadn't looked at it. She was just staring at the bland corporate art on the wall. The adrenaline from the crowd was gone, replaced by the familiar, cold ache of pressure. This was the part no one saw. The part after the entrance. The part where the legend has to live up to the myth. The roar was addictive, yes, but it was also a contract. They weren't cheering for her, the person. They were cheering for their memory of her. They were cheering for the person who was faster, stronger, and didn't have the slight tremor in her hands that she had now. Her phone buzzed again, a different pattern. A text. She picked it up. It was from her mother. It wasn't "congratulations" or "we're so proud." It was just 7 words. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" She stared at the message, the blue light illuminating the doubt in her own eyes. She typed back a single word: "Yes." But she wasn't sure if she was trying to convince her mother or herself. The hardest part wasn't returning. The hardest part was staying. The ghost had to become flesh again, and flesh can be broken. The company, sensing the cultural moment, called an emergency press conference for the next day. The room was packed. This wasn't just the wrestling media. Major sports networks had sent their top people. This had transcended the bubble. The prodigy was seated first. She looked exhausted, her eyes red, but she wore a mask of forced professionalism. Then, the matriarch entered. The room erupted in camera flashes, 1,000 tiny suns all focused on her. She sat down, smiled, and the room went silent. The first few questions were softballs. Why now? How did it feel? She gave poised, perfect answers. She respected the industry. She respected the new generation. Then, a reporter from a major sports blog turned to the prodigy. "Last night was supposed to be your moment," he said, his voice void of sympathy. "How does it feel to know that no matter what you accomplish, you will now and forever be an asterisk in her story?" The air left the room. The prodigy's smile twitched. She gripped the microphone. "I am the champion," she said, her voice shaking. "I am the one here every single day." The reporter cut her off. "But are you the one they paid to see?" That was it. The crack. The prodigy slammed the microphone on the table. "This is a joke," she snarled, and stormed off the stage, the cameras following her exit, capturing her unraveling. As the prodigy stormed out, creating a chaotic scene of shouting reporters and scrambling PR agents, the matriarch did nothing. She didn't flinch. She didn't look surprised. She simply watched her go, an expression of, was it pity? She slowly picked up her own microphone, the room falling silent once more, desperate to hear her reaction. She tapped it once. "Well," she said, her voice calm and smooth, "that was unfortunate." She then turned to the reporter who had asked the question. "To answer your question, it feels good to be back." And then she smiled. It was a simple, devastating act. In one move, she had established the entire dynamic. The prodigy was chaos. She was control. The prodigy was emotional. She was calculating. The prodigy was a child throwing a tantrum. She was the adult in the room. The media had their headline: "The prodigy cracks under pressure." The queen's composure. Without laying a hand on her, the matriarch had just won the first battle. It wasn't a wrestling match. It was a psychological dismantling. She had returned and, with calculated silence, had convinced the entire world that the champion wasn't fit to hold the title. The match was now inevitable, but in the court of public opinion, it was already over. Weeks passed. The pressure mounted. The prodigy wasn't herself. She was training with a desperate, frantic energy. She was watching old tapes of the matriarch, not to find a weakness, but because she was haunted. She was snapping at trainers, at referees, at her own friends. One night, while she was alone in the training center, hitting a heavy bag as if it were her rival, an old voice cut through the silence. "You're punching wrong." She turned. It was the architect. A retired legend, the man who had trained both of them, years apart. He walked slowly, his knees bad, but his eyes were sharp. "You're trying to beat her," he said, gesturing to the bag. "You can't." The prodigy scoffed. "I'm stronger than her. I'm faster. She's a relic." The architect shook his head, a sad smile on his face. "You don't get it, kid. You're not fighting the woman who walks around backstage. You're not fighting the person in the hotel room. You're fighting the ghost. You're fighting the idea of her. You're fighting the music. You're fighting the golden light." He tapped her on the shoulder. "And the problem with fighting a ghost is that ghosts don't get tired. They don't feel pain. They don't bleed. But you do. She's already beaten you, and she hasn't even thrown a punch. The night of the big match. The arena is electric, a feeling of history in the air. The camera isn't on the ring. It's backstage, hours earlier, in the empty arena. The matriarch is standing in the center of the ring, just as she did on her return, looking up at the empty seats. The architect's voice comes again, this time addressing her. It's a cruel thing you're doing, you know. She turns, her face unreadable. She was a good champion, he says, joining her in the ring. She carried this place. The matriarch nods. She's the best champion they've had in a decade. The architect looks confused. Then why? Why come back and do this to her? The money, the ego, you need one more run? She turns away, looking at the giant screen where her own face will soon be displayed. I watched her, the matriarch says, her voice quiet. I watched her beat everyone. I watched her get complacent. I watched her become bored. She had no rivals. She had no mountain left to climb. She turns back to the architect. She's the future. But a future without a great challenge is just a long, slow decline. She didn't need another opponent. The architect's eyes widen as he understands. She needed a villain, the matriarch finishes. She needed a ghost. She needed her own final boss. The camera holds on her face. The return wasn't about her. It wasn't about taking the title. It was about giving the prodigy the one thing she lacked, a legend to conquer. The matriarch didn't come back to take over. She came back to be overthrown.